Frankenstein, now a terrifying adventure module for any system and level, available for download at questgivers.com. For a long time, viewers have been asking me for a review of this book, Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master by Michael Shea. Recently, Bob Worldbuilder did a review of this book, and he said it was even better and more useful than the Dungeon Master's Guide. Is it true? We take a look today on Dungeon Craft. Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor Dungeon Master.
And I'm Deathbringer. Level up your game by subscribing.
Today we're taking a look at Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And spoiler alert, I absolutely love it. And I also agree with my colleague Bob Worldbuilder, who says this book is probably better than the Dungeon Master's Guide. And I'm a fan of the Dungeon Master's Guide. I actually like the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. It's my favorite next to the first. But this book gives you more practical advice on how to run a better D&D game and see immediate results. So let's take a look. Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is softbound, 94 pages. It is by Michael Shea. Now, the title of this book, Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, is a bit of a misnomer. When he says Lazy Dungeon Master, that's hyperbole. What he really means is Efficient Dungeon Master. This is a book about being efficient. The theme is right here. Prepare what benefits your game and omit what does not. That means thinking about your game carefully so you realize how you spend your time. The first chapter, Lazy Dungeon Master's Checklist, provides an overview of the book. Each of these subheadings will eventually be its own chapter. Review the characters, create a strong start, outline potential scenes, define secrets and clues, develop fantastic locations, outline important NPCs, choose relevant monsters, select magic item rewards, and get loose and get comfortable. The chapters are deliberately short, like this one is only 2 pages long. Review the characters, learn the characters' names, and refer to the players as the characters during the game to encourage role-playing. Keep the important stats like hit points on 3x5 index cards. This chapter, Create a Strong Start, is where my esteemed colleague Bob Worldbuilder and I are going to disagree. He doesn't think you should always start with action, and that's great. That works for his game. Personally, I always say less exposition, more demolition. I love dropping the players in the middle of a fight, and they don't even know why they're there. It always seems to work. Maybe it's because I only run a game once every month or two, but the players, it always seems to get the blood pumping. Just like in Star Wars begins in media res. In Star Wars 1, which has been retconned to be called Episode 4, but I remember when it was the first episode. It starts with the Star Destroyer pursuing Princess Leia's rebel ship and it being captured. And you don't know why the fight is going on. You just dropped into the middle of the action, in the middle of the conflict with Darth Vader. And the reason you don't want to start in the beginning is because it's boring. Like, you'd have to start with the taxation of trade routes, which is super boring. So you want to get all that world building and background out of the way. Less exposition, more demolition, start with an action scene. And Mr. Shea gives you a number of examples of a strong start. Outlining potential scenes. So here's the thing. You should write the scenes, maybe write them on index cards, but don't plot out when they're going to occur, because as you well know, players are going to have their own ideas and take the game in an entirely new direction. So you want to plot out the scenes, but you can't be married to them, and you got to be willing to throw them out or rearrange them if it doesn't fit the direction the players want to go. It's the players who are in control of your game. Same thing with define secrets and clues. The recommendation here is that you define the secrets and the clues, but you don't choose where they're going to be found. Because if you design a scenario where there's an important clue in the book, in the library, how do you know the characters are going to search that bookshelf? How do you know they're going to open that book? How do you even know they're going to the library? Instead, let the game play out, and when you feel it's right as a game master, drop a clue on the player characters. And this way, you don't have to worry about the players not finding them. Developing fantastic locations. They recommend starting with a cool name, like the Bridge of Teeth or the Path of Screams, and then building your location from there. And try to make those locations, especially for final boss fights, really one of a kind and super memorable. And again, they give examples of 10 fantastic locations. Outline important NPCs. One of the tricks they give is to model your NPCs on already existing characters, like Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Belloc is a foil for Indiana Jones. He is very intelligent, elegant. He's not a physical match for Indiana Jones, but he's always beating him to the punch. He's always one step ahead of Jones. He's a very slimy, manipulative character, but also very charming. So you could just take Belloc, reskin him, and turn him into a villain in your game. Choose relevant monsters. I'm going to cut to prepare boss fights. When you build a boss fight, you need to know the boss's capabilities, but not so you can counteract them. You want to let the characters show off. However, you also want to avoid having a powerful boss get killed in the first round of combat. And he recommends running test fights. For a new DM especially, test fights are a great way for a new game master to get the feel of the game, to get an idea of how that combat could possibly turn out. Magic item rewards. So I don't give magic items, so I'm just going to skip this chapter. Our preparation notes so far, this is a summary of all the major bullet points that we've already read. Chapter 12, reducing the checklist. If you had to reduce the checklist to just 3 steps, the most important are creating a strong start, defining secrets and clues, developing fantastic locations. Because if you start strong and the players are invested in the story and they have a fun time fighting and doing the things the characters do, they're probably going to come back for the next session, which is really what you want at the end of the day. Other high-value preparation activities. So these are high-value preparation activities, and so are these. Things that really make your game better. Handouts, maps, artwork of NPCs. A lot of game masters get hung up on building the world and sitting down and writing the last 1,000 years of history. But those are not things that the players are generally interested in. They're not going to result in a drastically better game. But if you hand a player a really cool handout, a letter with a wax seal, that really elevates the game and makes it much more memorable. The Lazy Dungeon Master's Toolkit. People have asked me for an episode like, what's in my toolkit? And it's all the stuff here. Game Master Notebook, Campaign Worksheet, Index Cards, GM Screens, Dry Erase Flip Mats, Miniatures and Terrain. Get rid of what isn't useful. Not everybody is a miniatures and map and terrain kind of Game Master, and that's totally cool. If you're not going to use it, don't use it. Reskinning monsters, reskinning dungeons, reskinning worlds. Very simple concept. Instead of calling it an orc, call it a Night Stalker. Now, when the player characters go to the town and the townsfolk tell them about the horrific night stalkers that are making off with their livestock or their children or whatever, it sounds mysterious and intimidating, whereas the orcs are going to make the players shrug because they've met a million orcs before. If you use the same stats and just call it something different, your players are never going to know the difference. And what they don't know behind the screen doesn't matter. It's like if you're reskinning NPCs, you're not cheating. You're making life easier for yourself. Building a lazy campaign. Great advice here on the Spiral campaign. Here's the concept. You want to build your keep or your home base, your keep on the Borderlands. Ask the players where you want to go for the next session. You can go to the mountains to the north, the Caves of Carnage to the west, or the swamp to the south. If they say we want to go to the swamp, just design the swamp. You don't need to know what is located to the north. We don't need to know what's in the Caves of Carnage. Design the place where the players are going to go next. And you only have to design about 5 encounters of that. You just have to be one step ahead of the player characters. It is not an efficient use of a game master's time to plan things their players are not going to experience. We have a nice chapter on running session 0, running your game. Top traits of good game masters include relax and listen. I agree. You really have to listen and trust your tools. If you really listen to your players, they will offer suggestions. The players may say, hey, let's search the fireplace for clues. And that gives you a hint as to where you should drop the clue, and the player will feel clever for having found it, and you get to keep the player characters on track. When you relax and trust your tools, it's easier to improvise because things like clues and NPCs and a curated name list is there so that you can use it. The next few chapters are about offloading. Have the players summarize the previous session. Have the players describe their killing blow. Ask the players, hey, what interesting characteristic makes this tavern unique, and let them tell you there's a dragon head on the wall, or there's a chandelier made of antlers, and now you have some flavor for that inn. It looks totally different. Same thing with what happens along your journey, or how did you meet? Instead of worrying about that and spending precious time thinking about it, offload it on your players, have them do your work for you. That's what being a lazy dungeon master is about. Improvising NPCs, improvising scenes and situations, using multiple combat style. Here he gets into details on how to run gridded tactical combat and how to run an abstract or a hybrid approach. So you might be a mind's eye game master or a tactical game master. It's up to you and your group. He's just offering suggestions on how to do these things, not suggesting one style is better than another. Books you can read, movies you can watch, take a walk. I often take a walk, actually, to plan my games, especially before the game and after the game. And of course, Chapter 27, Embracing Game Master's Truths. This is key. Players don't care as much as you think. I've said this many times on this channel. As game masters, we have this impossible standard. We want every game to be better than the last game. When our players tell us that was a great game, we want to top ourselves. But the fact is, the players, their standards for success for a game are probably far lower than yours, and that's totally cool. What they want to do is see their characters do awesome things. It doesn't matter what game system you use, whether it's 5e, OSR, or your own home brew. Players want to do cool things with their characters. That's why they come to the game. And that's critical for a game master to realize. Again, you planning your game world with the same detail as George R.R. Martin, it's just not necessary. Because a novel is about world building. A role-playing game is about a bunch of people sitting around a table trying to do cool things with their characters. If you take away nothing else from this book, it is a critical lesson, one that served me well for many years. Other lazy Dungeon Master tricks, awarding levels instead of experience points. Improvisability and skill checks. I'm really amazed at how many game masters feel they have to actually write down, like, what is the target number, what is the difficulty class for every single lock and door and so forth. These are things that you could just plan on the fly. Skip initiative. You could always say, hey, the orcs get the jump on you. They win initiative this round. Use static monster damage. You just say you lost 6 hit points and move on. And one of my favorite pieces of advice, run low-level campaigns. Again, I've said this a million times on this channel, but running lower-level games is far easier than running high-level games. If you're a new game master, I always recommend get the essentials set. Play up to 6th level, then start a new campaign with a bunch of new characters. Give your players a chance to play new characters. Once D&D gets past really 8th level, things start getting hairy, and the game master's got to do a lot more planning. And if you just don't have time, that's okay. Developing your own style. Look, every game master is going to have their own individual style. It's not about you emulating your friends or Matt Mercer or me. You're going to find your own groove. You're going to find that style of game that your players like, and you will develop as a game master into your own person. And that's one of the major themes of this book, and it's a great way to end the book. I have to agree with Bob, World Builder. This book is a must-own and the perfect Christmas gift for any aspiring dungeon master. You'll find a link to it below. Also below, you'll find a link to Dungeon Craft on Facebook, Patreon, and a link to my module Frankenstein, so check those out. But don't go away. Check out this video on the one classic piece of literature every dungeon master should read. I'll see you soon. May all your rolls be 20s.
Deathbringer again. This is usually the part where I make a joke about Professor Dungeon Master's life, but it looks like life already beat me to it. Get a t-shirt and watch more Dungeon Craft.